Hello, everybody. My name is Noah Washington, and you are here with the Blerdbinder. Today with us, we have Mr. Marlon Mckenney, a San Francisco-based author, illustrator, and creative director. In 2017, Marlon founded Conscious Culture Publishing that focuses exclusively on African historical fiction and diverse multicultural content. He uses 3D technology to create highly detailed illustrations and animations that bring African histories, mythologies, and legends to life. Mr. Marlon, how are we doing today?
Hey, how's it going, Noah? I'm doing well. Hey.
Good.
Doing good.
Great. Great to hear. So let's just get right into it. What inspired you to start this company?
Yeah, so I'm sorry, I'm going to hijack your interview real quick, but 2 days ago, we had a crowdfunding campaign for our latest book, Makita, the Queen of Sheba. And I just wanted to say, while I have this platform, just thank you to everybody out there who contributed to this book. We met our goal of 10K, and I just want to do a shout out to Jesse Bird, Don Hardy, Sarita Braxton, the National Council of Black Studies, Personal Touch Entertainment, as well as Afro Comic Con. It was a huge success, and I just want to say thank you to all the people that supported our new book, Makita, the Queen of Sheba. I truly appreciate it. But now to go back to what you just said, hi, my name is Marlon Mckenney. And I started Conscious Culture Publishing perhaps maybe 4 years ago. And just to give the people out there just a little bit of background, it was kind of a convergence of three different things, kind of like a Venn diagram. So in my past, I have a history of doing animation, 3D, all kinds of illustration. But at the same time, I used to work for many advertising firms. So I learned a lot about marketing and advertising and sustainable businesses. And then at the same time, when I went to school, I learned a lot about African history, Long Beach State with Malana Karenga, hip hop, and as well as Black culture. So when I put all those three things together, that's when I had the idea of, you know what, I'd like to use my illustration and my marketing background to create something for children that can teach them more about African history, as well as just books to empower them by seeing people that look like them in those pages. Does that make sense, Noah?
Yeah, that's a great answer. That's just an awesome, and it's an amazing work that you've been doing. What's been a major influence on your work? We live in an age of where Afrofuturism and just, pro-Black art is at an all-time high. Is there anything you can specifically point to?
I mean, honestly, so the company is called Conscious Culture Publishing, and I'm a big proponent of culture. So, I mean, I get my influences everywhere, all parts of culture. When we're talking about music, when we're talking about dancing, when we're talking about anything that just moves the African, just as well as diverse cultures forward with positivity. I mean, whether I'm looking at movies, whether I'm walking down the street, looking at graffiti pieces, so a lot of times I go to bookstores and just look through books as well as magazines. Like, I'm just being honest, like everything that I look at in the world really inspires me and helps me to come up with the unique stories that we're publishing.
So you mentioned a whole lot of influence or different art forms that influence your work. What's an unusual influence you've had? Like something people wouldn't think is amazing.
Probably specifically for me, the people who know this personally know this, but I'm a huge mixed martial arts fan. And I've been training Muay Thai kickboxing. If people don't know, that's from Thailand. And that's something that's really influenced a lot of my just physical involvement. But yeah, kickboxing, punches, knees, kicks, grappling, jujitsu, which is another art, right? Right? It's art. It's a martial art. So all different types of arts are the things that influence me to come up with stories.
Wow. That's just dope. You're gonna inspire young Black men and women for years to get inside the studio and the dojo. That's dope.
Yeah.
That's dope.
Yeah.
So
not to cut you off, Noah. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to cut you off, but I also just want to mention to the people out there that right now, UFC Ultimate Fighting Championships, there are 3 African champions right now, world champions 3, which is the most any other time in mixed martial arts history. So I think that's really cool.
So for you, what is the intersection between all of this? What is the common point that connects all of them?
Well, that's what I try to do with my stories, is to bring all of these different kind of touch points together in terms to tell a real meaningful story that'll helpfully motivate your kids when they're reading it. Just to put things in perspective, if you have a child, probably between like kindergarten all the way up to the 3rd or 4th grade, and even adults, just stories that bring the good, the bad, the highs and the lows, just everything together to make something that feels more real, something that's more authentic. And at the end of the day, like, educate your children in terms of how they can achieve their goals and get better at whatever type of obstacles that they're going through in their life. That's basically what happens when I intersect everything and put out one of my stories or one of my books.
Well, that's just amazing to hear. But what does the role that Afrofuturism play in your stories and in your books?
Yeah. So the thing about the way my approach is, when I first started working and making these stories, I'm literally the only one doing it all in 3D. If people know out there, there's software where you can model, texture, all kinds of different environments, people, animals. But the cool thing about that is you can take those same models and you can use them to create a video game. You know, you can use those to create a movie. You can use those to create television shows. It ends up making the assets, and I'm talking about the assets, the raw models and everything, able to do so much more. I mean, VR, you can pop on a headset and let's say you come up with a character. Now you can interact with that character in 3D. So just because of the way that I am using technology to create these stories, it opens it up to anything digital that may come, years from now, 10, 15, 20, 30, 40 years from now, because it's all created digitally, if that makes sense.
I'm glad you brought up the technical aspects of how you make your books. Do you think would those be easily translatable into other mediums? Could, like, from page to screen, did you want to see them maybe as movies, or as you said, video games or animations? Do you see that happening anytime in the future?
Yeah, absolutely. The whole point was, when I first started doing this, but the first thing that's top of mind is, if I'm going to take this story, I want to make sure that this will work as a motion picture film, right? I want to make sure this will still have legs. If you take this thing and make a television program for it, it still has legs. If you want to come up with a whole series, that was my main emphasis. Because, I mean, as most people know, even when they're playing video games, it's a story, right? It's a whole crazy story that you're, learning all these different things. So the books that the books I put out, I definitely want them to go beyond just a physical book.
Are we looking at, when we were talking before, are we looking at a full Marlon cinematic universe, the MCU?
Exactly. I mean, what I also try to do is relate some of the characters between some of the different books together, for the future and for the past. Like, this is really random, but for my first book, this is my first book. It was Alice in Wonderland Remix. And I basically took Alice and I remixed it, added a lot of African-American themes, as well as African themes. But there's this one piece, and this is just to give you a demonstration. She's falling down the kind of like rabbit hole area. And there's some books here, but one of the books that are just falling down says The Genius of Egypt. And The Genius of Egypt is actually my other book. And this is my first book. So I'm just trying to tie all of these different elements together.
I look forward to the Avengers-like crossover between all of them, whatever that adventure looks like.
Right.
So what are you looking at? What is the long-term goals that you have?
Right. I mean, I've got some long-term goals as well as short-term goals. And when I talk about short-term goals, I mean, first, you've got the year and you've got the 5 years. But one thing that's coming up that I'm really excited about is this something called the Children's Book Workshop. And it's aligned with my editor, Jesse Bird, as well as Pixar. So what's going on right now, they're taking a group of 10 children between 8 and 11, and they're teaching these kids the process of how to create their own stories. And it's basically going to be like 10 workshops. And in each workshop, they're going to talk to, some people from Pixar, like some writers or some artists. And once they come up with the story, then they're going to use different illustrators to illustrate that story. And I happen to luckily be one of the illustrators. So that's something that's kind of coming up probably this year with some kids coming up with this idea and me illustrating it. That's going to be a really fun project, as well as my first book, which is The Genius of Egypt, this little piece right here. It's been doing so well that I have to come out with part 2. People have been hounding me. People bought it and be like, when are they going to come out with the series for that? So I'm also going to be working on the Genius of Egypt part 2, as well as Makita, the Queen of Sheba, the previous book I was talking about before. We have the crowdfunding for towards the end of the year in September. It will be on Amazon, Barnes and Nobles, Target. It'll be Target. Let's call it Target. It'll be in all those online retailers.
Great. Can you tell us a little bit about, speaking of your book and your crowdfunding, tell us a little bit about the Queen of Sheba.
Yeah. Oh, man. So all of 2020, I'm sure everybody out there who's listening had a lot of, challenging times, right? Being confined to your home. So during that time, I took that time to come up with this extraordinary story about Makita, the Queen of Sheba. I wanted to do a book about a strong female hero. I did a little bit of research. I pulled up her name, read a little information about her, and then just started writing, came up with the story, and it is some of my best work. And the book itself just focuses on female leadership. That's the real purpose of the book, and how to maneuver when things get difficult through the ups and downs, because everybody in their life has ups and downs, right? And it's important that we don't get discouraged by our ups and downs, but to keep moving forward to achieve our goals. So that's like the primary, spirit and vision behind the book, to help young Black girls out there get through difficult situations by saying, hey, you're a queen and you can do this, you can be a leader, and you can get things done.
Through your art, you mentioned inspiring. Is there, throughout all the works you have done so far, what is the message you hope to deliver?
Yeah. I mean, honestly, the biggest message is always belief in yourself, right? We get chipped down. There's so much social things that are going on. I'm not going to get on the whole thing about like police, war, racism, fascism, poverty. There's so many difficult things out there for people to overcome, especially when you're young, right? And I'm talking about from kids all the way up to, adults, even adults. Things are really difficult. And the biggest thing that I want children or people to get really grasp a hold on is, first of all, you have a lineage and a history of people from the motherland, Africa, ancient history that built vast civilizations. So let's just start right there. That, you know, we have a great antiquity of so much science and information, and I want to make sure that kids know that, and they can do that for the future, like you were just talking about before, taking that type of mindset and then not only handling goals that are happening in your life right now, but then visioning towards the future and doing things that are bigger and better than anything else that's going on in front of them. I hope that answered your question.
That's such a beautiful answer, and I think it's more important for that to be conveyed now more than ever. Everything's happening in the world. So you were speaking of your short-term and long-term goals. What is your ideal project that you have not yet worked on?
Yeah, I mean, of course, we were just talking before about like movies and video games and that type of thing. Of course, I've always wanted to make animated short, so as well as a full-length piece. So that's definitely something I want to look into. But at the same time, I do have a lot of ideas for new stories, right? Tons of ideas for futuristic stories, because even though a lot of the work I've been doing recently has to do with ancient African history, I also have a side that I used to do a lot of design that was actually super techie, futuristic, very high technology. And that's also something that I have in my wheelhouse. And it's only a matter of time, depending on the project. It might be the Children's Book Workshop Pixar project that I'm actually displaying that. But sooner or later, I am going to pull that little rabbit out of my hat, because that's also something that I'm truly inspired about. You know, I was a Star Wars head back in the day, just like everybody else, all that. And I've always loved science fiction. Matrix is one of my favorite movies, because that's one of those movies that not only is it great in terms of the story, but it also is kind of showing you a lesson in the background. But I just want to be contributing that type of legacy.
Man, I'm happy. I'm happy to hear that. That's what you are bringing. Can you tell us a little bit about how the whole Pixar illustration thing came out? That might be cool for young illustrators out there to hear.
Yeah, I mean, I'll say this: any parents out there, if you have any kids that are between the age of 8 and 11, they can too participate in this project. If you go to, it's www.tasinc-sf.org. It's called the Children's Book Workshop. You can sign your kid up if they're between 8 and 11 for this program. They're going to do, I think, use probably five different illustrators. So if anyone is out there, they could definitely sign up for that and have their kid, be part of history by creating some of these really cool books out there. Absolutely.
How about you? Where did your love for illustration and writing come from?
Oh yeah. Yeah, I can talk about that all day. So just let everybody know out there, ever since I was a kid, I've been drawing. Ever since I was 3 or 4 years old, I was the kid. So take a little step back. I used to have asthma as a kid. So that meant I was in the house all the time. I couldn't run out and play like a lot of the boys and girls. So I'd be in the house just drawing, looking at comic books, drawing over and over, like Spider-Man comics. As well as anything I could get my hand on. And from there, I just started getting better and better and better. During high school, I was the kid in the back of class who was always drawing. I never got the best grades, but that's okay, because soon after I ended up going to art school, I quote unquote found my superpower. This is what I'm good at. I'm not trying to be doing no hardcore like algebra and trigonometry. That's just not how I roll. I'm a creative person. It's just in my bones. That's just how I roll. And ever since I got the training and graduated art school and became focused, I've done extremely well. So I'll say this out there to any creatives. If you're out there and you're trying to figure out how can I make money from being creative, there's always a way. And the first thing you probably should start thinking about is getting the right training. And the training can be anything. It could be anything from going to school, but it also could be looking at YouTube videos. And if you don't need something to kind of get you started, look at something that you think is really cool and try to copy it. You know what I'm saying? Just try to copy it and give yourself your own project. See, you're walking down the street, you see a billboard, redesign that billboard. You know, those are the type of ways where you actually end up learning about the true problems that marketers and all kinds of big businesses are trying to solve by doing that type of exercise. I hope that wasn't too long-winded.
No, it's perfect. It's exactly what we're looking for. I too went to art school, and so I have an understanding that some projects that you work on in in college, at art school, and maybe you never get back to it, but maybe you do. Are there any projects that you did back then that you'd love to come back to now?
Yeah, there's a couple, but sometimes. Well, I mean, I'm just talking specifically for me. Sometimes you can come back to something, but it may be a little bit dated. So what you probably have to do is change it up a little bit, because I've had some ideas back in the day. Funny thing, and this is just super random. I even had a idea about there being a revolution in this country in the year 2020. But what actually happened was the flip opposite, where you have like all these white supremacists actually trying to do the revolution. It's just reality is stranger than fiction.
Jeez, man, you should be a Simpsons writer with this level of pinpoint accuracy. That leads to a very good talking point. Or is there any project currently out there that you think you could aid in and deliver a new voice, making that already existing project better, i.e. The Simpsons possibly?
Yeah, I will say this. I mean, when people are looking at this, I'm pretty lucky because black don't crack. I'm an older gentleman, so I've been around quite a bit. And with that being said, things go in cycles. And right now it's 2021. I'm pretty sure the 90s, I'm starting to see it now, 90s fashion is coming back. But I would love to work on some type of story or a narrative set in the 90s, because that was a time where it really shaped my life. And I believe I can give a very accurate vision of what the 90s would be like, because that was a very transformational period in my life.
That's funny. My own parents, they talk about the 70s and 80s, and I'm not trying to make you feel old, Mr. Marlon, so don't come through the screen, please, and hit me. And to me, it seems almost like you're talking about the 1800s, because I wasn't there. I had no clue, who can vouch for what they're saying. Is that kind of the approach you would take to it? You would play it fast and loose. Would you, what angle would you attack it from?
I'm one of those people that believe in cycles, right? There's always going to be some cycles, just in terms of time. And if you pay attention to history, I really like history, you start to see that there's patterns and things that happen over and over and over again. And so specifically, if we're talking about the 90s, before the 90s, people weren't really wearing dreadlocks. You know what I'm saying? Like in the 80s, they weren't rocking dreadlocks. They weren't doing the shaved head with the dread thing. And it was a lot of baggy clothes. It was a lot of mixtures of different type of culture. it wasn't so, I guess, separated. Just the skaters would hang out with the hippie kids that hanged out with the rappers. It was a very homogeneous. And if you listen to the music in the 90s, you'll see that there's a lot of different identities. I just feel right now everyone's kind of doing a lot of the same thing. There are, people who are out there doing, being creative. I'm not just going to cast a whole blanket on just everything that's happening today, but I definitely see how people are mimicking other people, and just in terms of creative executions of certain things, because it's fashionable right now, or it's what's hot. There we go. Trying to ride that wave and get that clout, right? But I don't know if we're getting off topic, but I do think the thing about the 90s is that it was so vibrant with creativity. It was a lot of different type of expression in the 90s, which I truly appreciate.
So you're saying that it's worse, or maybe let me ask it a little more clearer. So you think we're worse off creatively now than what we were in the 90s when we had all these different identities?
That is not, I'm not saying that at all, because the other thing that's actually switched nowadays is there's so much access. There was no internet in the 90s. There's so much access right now to everything in the entire world. I mean, if we wanted to, and I'll just, so back in the day, I used to DJ, and I was really into music, right? So back in the days, if you're going to make, people out there, you're going to make a little demo tape, you're going to make, something with music, you would have to buy a bunch of equipment. But nowadays you can literally just pull up your laptop and just make like multi-track recordings. You can make movies, anything you can think of. If I want to learn how to start a business and be successful at it and know about marketing and this, I can go on the internet and figure all that stuff out like right now. So like creativity, there's tons of it right now. My only thought is sometimes the curators or the people that are kind of standing at the doors of letting something become more popular or less popular, which is less of that because of the internet. But all I'm saying is a lot of times people want to see the same old, same old. So not to just be long-winded with this conversation, but let's go back to publishing, right? So if you look into publishing right now and you looking for something that's different, and just in terms of showing diverse, multicultural stories, you will not see any stuff about African history. You're just not going to see it. I dare you people to go out there. You'll see some pieces here and there, but it won't be a lot of that work. And what happens is, if you're part of one of these bigger companies, you just want to see something that's already been done and proven to make money before you jump on board with that. I think the last time we were talking about was similar to the Black Panther movie came out, because once it came out and it started generating a lot of money, then that's when they started making other movies able to come out, like Enter the Spider-Verse, as well as the Hair movie, and just a lot of different things. But just doing that first breakthrough is always the hardest, trying to prove to corporate America that this story works, it matters, and it makes money, because that's all they want to hear about anyway, if it makes money.
The other side of that argument, though, is that at least in terms of television, let me not speak on any other platforms. We had the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, we had The Different World. Even heading into the early 2000s, we got The Game. We had Martin. It seems that there were a lot more Black-centric shows versus now, when we only have a handful. Sure, we got Kenya Barris out doing all he can do, but it's still, compared to what was on TV then, it seems like a lot less now.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts?
I think you are absolutely correct. I think you're right. I used to watch, I don't know if you've seen it. Have you watched In Living Color?
Of course I've watched In Living Color.
That
what
right
question
there.
Is that?
that right there, they wouldn't even do a show like that nowadays, which is pretty crazy.
You know, now that you say that, that is pretty crazy. You know, I think as each generation of audiences and viewers or just entertainment consumers get older, we get more sophisticated and we understand deeper meanings of stories. So at least to me, it seems backwards, right? That we got In Living Color then, but now no one wants to do it now. So it's definitely seems back.
Yeah, honestly, all I want to say is the solution to that is ownership. So the more we as people own the broadcasting methods, then we need to tell those stories. We need to do those shows. We can't wait for other people to put us on and do this stuff. We need to do it ourselves.
Ooh, you know, you're getting into a point that I was going to say for later, but since you brought it up, let's do it. So you spoke of Black ownership, right? Is it better to, for a lack of a better phrase or wording, right, own your content and not see as much money versus selling it to another company and potentially seeing billions? Because, well, let's say if, you know, your books get picked up and somebody's interested, they say, let me have the rights, and then the thing goes on to make $1 billion, you know, could you have gotten more if you had owned it outright?
Right.
And the chances of that.
Right. I mean, of course, first thing I got to say, it's on a case-by-case basis. But you do bring up a good point, because what happens a lot of times is, and I get it, the whole America thing is start a business, right? You go out, you start this business, you get the seed money, you go IPO, you make all this money, and then you sell the company, right? So that works if you are not if you're a person that actually cares about the community, if you're a person out there who actually wants to continue to create whatever you're creating for the community, if your why is, why am I doing this, is to help your community and create a long lasting legacy, then the thought would be you probably would not want to sell all of the rights. So it is like a devil in the details, because you can also, you know, have a percentage rate. You know what I mean? It's not necessarily going to be it's either this or that. There's parts in the contract where you can do some tweaking and get a lawyer in there and figure out what's going to truly suit your needs. But it is, I'm sure Master P would probably say this as well. You always, quote unquote, want to keep your masters. And I do agree with that. If you feel that like you can get a payday and then create a new business that's going to help, you know, your community in a different way, then that's totally up to you, that person that created that that particular company. You know what I mean? It just depends on how you want to be using it and why. Why are you doing it in the first place? You want to make some money, or you really want to help people?
You know, that's a great argument to be had, playing devil's advocate. You know, part of the reason why I personally believe Black Panther did as well as it did is because it had Disney behind it, right? Mm-hmm. Versus, right, if, you know, I'm, say, an independent or solo artist, it would, unless word of mouth spreads quickly, it would be harder. Right. And you must have had that experience getting to reach out.
I mean, that is totally correct. But at the same time, I'm saying it's not a one-sum game. So even if the writer didn't sell all of his rights outright and maybe just got, you know, 50 cents for every this or that, I mean, that still is going to help in the long run. And I will say this, just to your point, to your devil's advocate point, even if you're going to take the payday, right, you're going to sell off your baby, sell it off and make some money, I would just hope you would take the money to create more, you know what I mean? More different things or properties for the community that can, help even more people. You know what I mean? If you can take that money and do something positive with it, then that's a win-win too.
I have to then shout out Tyler Perry now, because, the more people that I ask that question to, the more I think of him. Say what you will about the man, but he did something great that will be remembered for decades to come.
Yep.
And it's absolutely inspiring.
Yeah, definitely. And I think his approach was, first things first, let me not depend on my community, but just use my community. I'm going to cater content towards them. And honestly, that's a similar vein to what I'm doing. I'm going to do my content for my community. I know who my target audience is. I know the type of entertainment they want. So I'm just going to give it to them. And if these other big studios are like, I'm not feeling you, then forget them. It doesn't matter about them. It matters about your community. And when you focus on that target community, they will be there for you. And that's how he did it. And honestly, it's similar to hip hop as well. You think of like Rockefeller or Ruthless Records, with NWA. So if you know your target, you know the people you want to serve, they want your content, just keep giving it to them. It may take longer, but the fruit is way more sweeter and way more abundant, right? Because you own the tree.
As I was saying before, Marlon, once you get the Marlon cinematic universe up and going, and you make your billions of dollars, the only thing I ask for is a place, just a couch, just a couch in your mega mansion. That's all. Just a little thing for me.
Whatever, Noah. I can already see that you have a bright future and you're ready to take things to the next level, right?
Thank you so much. But going back into it a little bit, there's a saying I like to paraphrase, right? And it's by W.B. Du Bois. Art does not serve a purpose or inspire some sort of change. What was the point of it to begin with? Do you believe in art for art's sake, or do you believe all art should inspire something?
I mean, I won't say all art should inspire something, because there's also practice, right? There's practice, and then there's the big game, right? So there's been many hours where I've created art, but basically I'm practicing. I'm just trying to figure it out, figure what I'm good at, figure what I like to do. But as soon as you get to a certain point where you're good at a certain level, you can consistently do it at that level, and you want to put it out there for other people. Now that's a whole other thing. Put it out there or sell it. I think for the people that don't want to create art that will hopefully help someone, heal someone, do something positive for the greater community, it's just not going to be as everlasting. It's going to be fleeting. And I know I never want to give anyone criticism that are doing anything artistic. I mean, if you want to do your thing, do your thing. I have no right to tell you what you should do. But for me personally, it's one of those things that it just makes me feel better that I'm actually doing something rather than just quote unquote getting a paycheck. Because I can do that too. That's not an issue. But at this point in my life, I need something more than that, especially our community, because we're getting hit the hardest. I mean, it's crazy out there. And I've told you this before, Noah. So I've worked at a lot of different companies throughout my career. And I've always been like the one black guy, the two black guys. I mean, even in art school, you know what I mean? And when I'm at a company and we go to a different company to have meetings, it's the same thing. So but my point was that is there's so much knowledge and there's so much education that I believe that the African American community needs to get, so that I will see people like myself in these type of positions in the future. I hope that answers your question.
Yes, it does. Thank you. So my next question is following up with it. Using the example of what you provided me, there's private art and art that you provide to the public, right? Mm-hmm. Even in those private settings, when you're practicing, right, isn't the goal to create at the end of the day?
Yeah, I mean, and I'll say this, and I'll use what I'm doing as an example. When I first started Conscious Culture Publishing, and I did my first book, which was Alice in Wonderland Remixed. When I first did that book, I really had to figure out, how am I going to create all of these elements using 3D? We've got a variety of different characters. We've got backgrounds. We've got trees. We've got houses. We've got all these different assets that need to be created. Now, how can I do that as one person? That could take forever. And so for a while, I just had to just do tests, you know what I mean? And figure it out on my own, how to make things work. So that's just like, and like I was saying before, if we're talking about kickboxing, it's like going to the gym and exercising, you know what I mean? Kicking pads, punching, doing push-ups. Just, you're trying to get to the point where you actually want to compete, or you actually want to put something out in the world, and heaven forbid you're asking people for money for it, you know what I mean? So at that point, I think that's when the owner should think about, am I really doing this just for me? Because that happens too. There's people out there that just want to have that cathartic experience and be like, oh, I put out, you know, X, Y, and Z, put out a poster, and now I feel good. But just for me specifically, I just need something bigger to achieve instead of just for myself. But that's just me. But I just don't want to hate on nobody else and just wants to do it just to put it out there. Am I making sense, or am I being too long-winded over here?
No, that makes perfect sense. Going into, you know, specifically what you were saying, did you have anything just practicing that came out of practice that you didn't expect, or anything, or something that you were like, you know what, this isn't a bad idea, let's follow up on this for the future?
Yeah, I mean, everything. I learned so much. In the very beginning stages, I was actually outsourcing a lot of my 3D work to like Indonesia. Yeah, I was outsourcing work, but it was I could already see it was going to be very expensive. So the thought was, I'm going to have to do this myself. But how am I going to create all these assets? And I've found out some software by doing a lot of research. I started doing it more and more. There were some problems with the software and the other software. You know what I mean? This is where we get into the blurred geeky stuff, where I'm trying to export this into this, you know what I mean? And the texture maps, I'm going a tangent. Texture maps are not working correctly. And I'm trying to animate this thing, and I'm having problems with the geometry. So I will say this, any creators out there, spend your due time, your due diligence perfecting what you're trying to do before you put it out and start showing people. Like, it's really important that you try to learn as much as possible about what you're doing and how to put it together in an efficient way that doesn't take a lot of money, doesn't take a lot of time, so that you can keep reproducing it. And honestly, Noah, it took me like probably a good almost 8 to 12 months before I was like, okay, I finally figured out how I'm going to do this moving forward.
You know, in your answer there, you said something that caught my attention. You were outsourcing to Indonesia at one point. Mm-hmm. Is there a lack of Black artists who can do that 3D animating work?
I didn't check into that, but at that point it was more about what was cheaper. I will say this. That's I'll just say this. Nowadays, we were talking about before. We were talking about creativity, right? And is there more or less creativity now? And then I was saying that people today have so much access to all these different type of computers and all this type of devices. And just one thing I just want to add to that, and hopefully it'll answer your question, is also we're living in a globalized society, right? It is completely global. I can jump on the internet and see what's going on halfway around the world, as well as communicate to people and work with people across the world. And because of currency and currency being different in different countries, you can have someone do something in one country that'll cost you $10, and in another country it'll cost you 50 cents. You know what I mean? So at the time, it was more about monetary. And even with that being said, I ended up not doing it because even that was expensive. But I'll step back to the question you asked. I do think there needs to be more Black animators out there. I do think there needs to be more Black illustrators, artists, creative directors, lighters, all that, animators, everything. I don't know how I can help, but I also would like to have African Americans know that that is a career path, because I think a lot of people don't even think of it as a career path. Does that make sense?
No, it makes perfect sense. Following up with that, typically, individual artists, right? They have to charge a higher price point than, say, as using the example earlier that Disney would, you may have to charge $10 where Disney can charge $8. Do you think that is why our art that is made by us isn't getting out there as much, or make people more reluctant?
That's a good question. It's making me think, but I mean, I think it still just goes back to, I'll say, studio heads and people are at the highest parts of different type of broadcasts. Honestly, most of those people don't really know what's going on per se on the street, right? And if something hasn't been created that's already been successful and made a tremendous amount of money, they are extremely reluctant to put their money, because it's an investment, right? At the end of the day, you're ahead of this studio. Honestly, they may not care if it's black, white, yellow, purple, alien, whatever. Will it make them millions and millions and millions of dollars? Because that's all they're looking at is spreadsheets. They don't know nothing about culture. They don't know nothing about any of that stuff. So it is extremely important that what we do just as a community, that we support African American in this type of work, so that we can go to these studios and say, hey, we created this, all these millions of people love it and want it. And that is our leverage to get some of this work done in some of the bigger studios. I hope that wasn't too long-winded, I keep saying, but did that make sense?
No, it makes absolutely sense. And I'm glad you said that. Shout out to Miss Annette Phillips. She came in with a great point to make. As African Americans, we're very spiritual people, and more often than not, we gather in churches. She brought up the point that teaching animation classes in churches, and let's take it a step further than that. We should be just generally having classes available to us that would not otherwise be available outside of those spaces. What's your thought and take on that?
Well, I'll say this: the pandemic has definitely showed us that we don't have to be in the same location in order to learn something. So that's, first of all, the churches is a great idea. Great idea. And I'll even open it up even more now that we have Zoom. Like right now, you're in Atlanta, I'm in San Francisco, and everybody on here is familiar with these Zoom calls. And that's a great way for kids to learn about this stuff, is when teachers and animators can go online and have classes for kids all over the world. I will say this, the pandemic has been horrible. It's been awful. A lot of people have died. It's definitely something that I wouldn't want to go through again, but it has shown that we can work together and do business remotely. Everyone can. And honestly, that's a game changer. So much of a game changer, and that's also our opportunity to be able to deliver more information, more education to kids nowadays, since we don't all have to be under the same roof.
Now, let me tell you, are you getting a little tired of Zoom yourself? Of having to do things over it?
I'll say yes, but it is what it is. I'm tired of racism too,
Complex questions require complex answers. Let me just give one more shout out to Miss Annette Phillips. She, she says she's happy for all the great work that you were doing out here and moving, our creative endeavors forward. And it's just absolutely, one more time, absolutely breathtaking work that you are doing here as we're moving into our final few minutes of this interview. So once again, we were speaking about Black ownership and Black legacies going forward in historical fiction, which is what you do. Is there anything more contemporary, let's just say the last 100 years, that you may want to add your own spin to going forward? Let's say last 100.
You know what? That's something, I'll just be honest, something I'd have to really think about, because I've kind of noticed my sweet spot is either ancient history or the future. And I've also done something a little bit more contemporary. This book that I put out my last book, Uptown Dragon, takes place now inside of Crown Heights, Brooklyn, where a little boy finds a dragon egg. It opens up and starts getting bigger and bigger. That's something I'll think about, but I will say this. There is a lot of books out there, kids' books, about civil rights, about a lot of the great leaders over the past, the civil rights period for the past 50 to 100 years. There's a lot of people doing that type of work. The reason why I'm doing African historical fiction is because no one is doing it. I mean, there may be a person here or there, but it's really not out there. And so whenever I see something, and I'll say this is also like a business thing as well. When you see something that people want, but there's not enough of it, then that's the business you need to get into. And when people usually get my books, that they're saying, "Oh, I've never seen anything like this. Oh my God, this is great. I've never seen anything that." That's why I'm keep doing that African historical fiction, because a lot of people don't. It's not really that prevalent out there. And then at the same time, when you're in a Black studies class, a lot of times you want to have like a visual, like a picture in your mind. And this helps with that picture. If you see a kid, South Central, hey, you know what? We used to be kings and queens. You're like, huh, what? But if you show them a picture and they read through it and they see it, they can visualize it and be like, oh, okay. So who knows what's going to happen in the future? But my sweet spot is ancient history, the future, and then kind of just like contemporary right now, those three touch points.
Okay, so things a little more speculative. In our final few minutes here, is there anything you want us, your audience and viewership to know, or any potential readers to know?
Yeah, and any people out there, if you love to look at really detailed illustrations of African history, check out ConsciousCulturePublishing.com. I'll say it one more time, ConsciousCulturePublishing.com. You can see a variety of the books, as well as the book I was talking about earlier, Makita, the Queen of Sheba, which is some of my best work. Also, you can follow us on IG, Conscious Culture Publishing on IG, Instagram, as well as Facebook. Feel free to shoot me a line. It's all good. I love the shout outs. And if you pick up the book, feel free to take a picture. I'll even post it, you know, on social media. I just want to like rewind the tape one last time. Thank you for everybody that supported Makita, the Queen of Sheba. I really appreciate it. And thank you, Noah, for having me on your show, dude.
No problem.
So
always a pleasure, never an inconvenience. Well, thank you all for joining here. Thank you so much, Mr. Marlon. I look forward to everything you do here in the future, and we will be right back in the same spot when it happens. Thank you all for viewing. This has been Noah Washington with Blerdbinder. Have a great day. See y'all later.